Anyways, I have a dream. The dream I just had really demonstrates something about me. Something you've probably seen a hint of on my YouTube videos. Basically, at some part in the dream, Mama had some sort of thing that you can make music with, except it was like a toy, and it had this separate part, and Mom kept pushing buttons on it or something in order to make it make these weird staticky noises that almost sound like instruments at times. However, apparently I was making weird faces whenever she messed with it, and she was like, "Do you like that?" And then she started making the noises with it, and then she said, and she's like, I think she laughed or something. I was like, "Why are you making that face?" or something. I was like, "What?" I still want to use it. And then she decided to give it to me. So then I didn't have the whole thing, of course. She sort of left with the big part. I was left with only a small part. I think that like went over to a bed somewhere or something, and all of a sudden it didn't look like its original shape, which I don't remember if it looked like a plus or a square, but it all of a sudden looked like a Dorito. I'm not kidding, it looked like a Dorito for some reason. The difference was it was more like one of those stale Doritos, the ones that if you see them sitting around for long enough. Unfortunately, I do not see any of them. But it's like when you see a Dorito sitting around on like the floor for too long, it becomes really hard. That's like what the one in my dream was. Except it was actually the toy, because despite it changing appearance right before my eyes, well, okay, not really, I don't think I was paying attention when it did. But when I'd push on it, it would make sounds. And I think at one point I was wondering, how does all that fit in this small Dorito thing? And I also had other Doritos near me in the dream, and I was thinking, I better not accidentally eat this, or else I'm going to eat this hard toy and put it in my body. But then, later in the dream, though, over to this like toy box, and whenever she reached into it, she found this little toy, and whenever she pushed a button on it, it sort of paused for a few seconds to load audio data. You know what I mean? Like, you know, on your computer, whenever you select a song, it sort of sits there for a second before it loads it. This can be seen right here. Whenever I select a song, it doesn't immediately start playing. Certain formats are a bit worse of offenders, but I can't really find one that probably would be one. Sometimes it really pauses. I just cannot find when they'll do it. Yeah, that right there. It's sort of like that pause, but it was like longer. Still, let's just explain about the next part. So then after Ma picks it up, she pushes that button on it. And after like a second or so, I don't know exactly how long again, but all of a sudden it started playing this what sounded like a copyrighted song, but I don't remember even hearing it, or what the song even was, of course, but I don't think it ever sounded familiar to me. Or maybe it sounded vaguely familiar within the dream. Sometimes I remember slight things from the dream and hope my mind isn't messing with me, so that's why I add those sometime. However though, then meanwhile I'm just kind of freaked out inside because of this toy. And I think that Mom can clearly see that. So then I think at one point she just turns it off, and then I request, could you get the Dorito and that other thing and take them out of here? Because, yeah, that's kind of strange. What was kind of really strange actually was, I don't know if she actually did that or not, or if she just left them there. But later in the dream, she was trying to get the CD player to work, which apparently, well, it was actually a radio, but it also was a CD player. I know that's pretty standard, I know cars have those, but a friend it was like this small thing you could hold, and it was a radio. I keep thinking maybe it was like the shower radio app or something, but it had a CD thing and it had the screen on it, which not even that aforementioned radio had or anything, no. No, actually it did. It has a time display on it, but this one like had graphics. So yeah, she had to move it to a very specific position. Like I think there was some sort of slider or something on it, like 2 of them, and she had to match them up so that there was C and D. It was kind of unobvious, not just a simple button to switch modes. You had to put the C and D in the correct positions. And then it would start the CD mode. And I think she had to do something else. I don't know if I'm just mixing it up and really the C and D thing was what she had to do to get it working. But I don't remember having to switch modes easily. I think she had to do something really unobvious to switch to mode 2. But then Momo was sort of determined to get it to work this time, and she did. Oddly enough, I don't remember her putting a CD in it. It just started playing music or something. But then I just stared there, and I don't know if I noticed it in the dream, but I wasn't really freaked out about this one. But the toys earlier made me freak out. Well, obviously I can't really remember any more about the dream, but it does give an interesting point to point out to you. Is that in the dream, the toy speakers make me freak out, but then if a CD player plays the audio, it doesn't. That's because that's the reason why my toys don't have batteries in them, because they probably would kind of worry me when I hear them. But yet things like laptops and the tablets and phones and TVs and radios are perfectly fine. This dream reflects that with a CD player radio thing not affecting me in the slightest. Yeah, it's just an interesting point. It's almost like video games, like there's old video games that have pre-rendered audio before it was a standard in video games. Don't know if I'm necessarily referring to games like F-Zero X that has pre-rendered music in it, which is still disappointing. Good thing I have that guitar, else I'd still be worried about it. But I'm talking about games on the NES that have like these pre-rendered voice samples and stuff. I don't mean the drums, or else why would I be using them in my own songs? But it was like the DPCM, you can't stand this, DPCM sucks! But it was like the DPCM and all those old things, and even like the Pikachu samples in Pokemon Yellow. It's that type of thing, when the pre-rendered audio appeared on a system that isn't seemingly capable of it. In the case of the Game Boy, literally, but in the case of the NES, trying to make things play on the DPCM channel that does not sound correct. So you have people going, "Ha!" instead of actually saying a word. And the Genesis similarly, when it has really messed up samples in them. Some of them can sound good. But hearing games like Street Dance with the pre-rendered audio everywhere is just as worrying as hearing a toy. And let's not forget about its visual equivalent, having what looks like a pre-rendered video. You might think, oh, but Xane, isn't that like Sonic the Hedgehog 2 or something? Well, it is sort of worrying to see that. I still wonder if that was a bunch of pre-rendered 3D images made by Sega, but don't think that necessarily affects me. I mean, I guess that looks kind of cool, and though it is blocky. But I mean things like the Toy Story Racer Game Boy one. I have to clarify the Game Boy one, else you'd think I'd be talking about the actually 3D racing game. That's not what I'm talking about. The one I played, which relied on FMVs. Refer to the Bizhawk Real-Time Corruptor mod video, the first one, Tail Cave, and you'll see me corrupting a few of those games that rely on pre-rendered graphics and FMVs. And it's that type of thing, along with pre-rendered audio on older systems, that gets me. I should have just clarified that. But it's just like the toy speakers when compared to other things, like computers and, well, computers, radios, all those other things I brought up. They're fine to me. It's weird. Well, why does one thing affect me and not the other? The stream brings up interesting points. And yet, while I wouldn't consider the LEGO Mindstorms NXT any of those things that I don't mind, I would consider it closer to a toy, especially with its speaker and the sound quality. In a way, it could potentially have one of those toy speakers. But why doesn't it freak me out? That's the question. Hearing it speaking really compressed, very compressed sample. Bluetooth detected. It's like hearing that really muffled. No. Trying to that doesn't freak me out or anything. Just to prove there are exceptions. But that's this train. Just wanted to point it out because it has some interesting points in it. Ones we haven't talked about before.